let me please introduce Mahbouba Seraj. She was born in Kabul. She graduated from Malalai High School for Girls and from Kabul University. Then she went into exile for 26 years to the United States and returned to Afghanistan at the end of 2003. And since then, she's been working with women and children of Afghanistan. She's the creator and announcer of a radio program for women by the name of Our Beloved Afghanistan by Mahbouba Seraj. And this program has been broadcasted nationwide. She also established women's listening circles in the villages of Afghanistan, circles in which women would gather to listen and to discuss different topics previously raised in her radio programs. Mrs. Seraj has been a tireless advocate for women's rights, pushing for women's participation in the Peace Jirga, as well as in the High Peace Council. And she and other women advocates were responsible in raising the women participation at the 2011 Bonn Conference and the 2012 Tokyo Conference on the topic of Afghanistan after 2014. Ali Ahmad is an independent researcher with a master's degree in peace and conflict studies. He's based here in Vienna. He's trained as a physician, and his research interests include non-state security actors, peace talks, non-violent strategies, and peace journalism. Ali Ahmad has published extensively in international media. He's currently pursuing his doctoral studies at the University of Vienna and is specializing in de-radicalization processes of conflict-affected societies. And prior moving to Vienna, he lived and worked in Kabul, Afghanistan as well. Mrs. Seraj, let's start with you. 2014 has marked the beginning of the probably most decisive phase in the history of Afghanistan since the end of the Taliban regime in 2001. It's a series of transitions, right, as you will outline in your lecture.
Yeah. Please. Thank you very much. Maybe. Can anybody hear me? Or no? Hello? Can you hear me? Very good. Okay. Now I think we're fine. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I cannot tell you how honored I am to be here. Beginning with the invitation of the Institute, and then seeing Mr. Ambassador here taking part in this gathering, and then seeing everybody's faces, a whole lot of the Austrian people and a whole lot of the Afghans in here. That to me is a sign that the world really has not forgotten Afghanistan. You still are interested in what is happening in Afghanistan, and I just want to tell you that it is as important as it was 10, 11 years ago, and it will be for the next 10, 11 years, to keep an eye on this country, to be with it, to support it, and to really watch what kind of a how you're progressing. That is going to be very important, because that actually is going to be a lot of lessons learned from this part of the world, that if we really watch it and we really are a part of it, we can learn a lot from Afghanistan. I am going to give you a little summary of Afghanistan active participation beyond 2014. Because it has been a very important year in the lives of the Afghans and Afghan women. 2014 was a pivotal year for Afghanistan. The country went through a series of transitions: withdrawal of international troops, election, a willing and peaceful transfer of power from one president to another, and dramatic economic changes, including the decrease in foreign aid, which has provided 80% of Afghanistan's budget, and a similar decline in the provision of services to international troops at bases throughout Afghanistan, principally affecting private sector service providers and their associates. This has been really a big thing as far as the economy is concerned for the country. Today, which is about 14 years after the end of Taliban regime, and 2 months after the official end of the war on terror, conducted in this country by the United States and its allies, Afghanistan still sees no end to its struggles with the collapsed economy, widespread unemployment, corruption, we are number 2 in the world, by the way, and continued armed conflict with insurgents all over the country, especially in the east, south, and the north. Our ongoing challenges. Women in general are unsure about their own future as well as the future of Afghanistan. They were not involved in security arrangements, peace talks, or the entire political transition. Women, however, contributed 38% of the vote in Afghanistan for the government to come into power. And they casted 38% of the vote in the presidential election. Yet, they have been marginalized, their ideas unsolicited, and their needs disregarded. In direct contradiction to UN Security Council 1325, women have been excluded from participation in public life at leadership levels, denied access to information, and left out of the decisions that will have a direct effect on their lives. During the recent cabinet selection by President Ashraf Ghani and CAO Dr. Abdullah, 3 women were proposed to lead different ministries, and all were rejected by the Parliament of Afghanistan. In case of one of the ministries, which is the Ministry of Culture and Information, when the woman was not approved, a man was represented to take her place, and he was accepted. During the recent, Women of Afghanistan, together with the Afghan Women Network, what we did because of this, we organized a peaceful demonstration, and we took to the streets of Kabul and calling for our rightful place in the political arena of Afghanistan. They demanded that at least 4 or 5 women be nominated as ministers, and the other women to be nominated as the deputy ministers, directors, ambassadors. To date, the demands of the Afghanistan women have been ignored so far. Afghan women are also very concerned about the upcoming peace talks. Peace talks between the Taliban and Afghanistan government. Every Afghan man, woman, and child wants to have peace. But what women in particular want is a durable peace. We would like to have a peace with justice, which includes all society. When women will not settle merely by a ceasefire handled by the military. We call for a just peace for all men, women, and children of this country. Let us not forget that this was not too long ago when girls found the doors of their schools closed to their faces, and women were beaten on the streets of Kabul if they left their houses without a mahram and walked alone on the streets to go do shopping or do what they have to do. So women were flogged on the streets of Afghanistan, and the country was set back by centuries. That was not too long ago. That was about 14 years ago. Today, on the other hand, 10 million students are going to schools, out of which, throughout Afghanistan, out of which 4 million of them are girls, and they're all going to school. We have more university graduates, masters, and PhDs than any other time in the history of Afghanistan, even in the golden era of the country, which is from the mid-60s to the mid-70s. It was a period of 10 years, which was called the golden era of Afghanistan. A whole lot of people don't know about that, but it was an amazing era of education and of achievement for women. And I happen to be belonging to that generation. And then there are more women that they have entered the workforce of Afghanistan today. They are in the military, they are in the police, and they are in politics. A quota system, which was introduced in Afghanistan's constitution, called for women to make up 25% of the parliament. And today, we have about 28% of women in the parliament of Afghanistan. Women also serve on the Provincial Council, even though at the Provincial Council level we lost about 5% of our women. It was 25, but we lost 5% of them. But right now, the Afghanistan Women Network with the rest of the women organization are working very hard to raise the percentage of women, or introduce actually a percentage of women into the district councils, because we would like to have at least 25% in the district councils, which is going to start this year in the middle of 2015 with the parliamentary elections. Next to Afghan women, children are the most vulnerable sector of the society. Although, as I mentioned, there are 10 million children that are going to school. But at the same time, the number of kids who live in poverty in Afghanistan, there's about 4 million of them. And most of these are poor kids, belonging to the families that don't have a father, or the mother is the only breadwinner of the family. And these women, they lost their husbands during the war, or in the past 14 years of all of these insurgency problems in the country. And in that way, they are unemployed, or they are disabled. They are ill or addicted to drugs, their mothers. And the children have to take to the streets and try to make some money and bring money to their families. And they are actually supporting their families. The withdrawal of international troops and the transfer of their responsibilities to the Afghan National Army have been positive. In the beginning, the loss of the Afghan soldiers in the combat field was really extremely a lot, although it is same right now that we are losing a lot of our soldiers. But at the same time, with the international forces being more aware of giving their help and support, this thing is changing as we go on. They're giving them training and equipment, so they can be holding their own. As for the women's security, in the areas where international forces have been replaced by national forces, depending on the geographical situation of these troops, women feel more secure in some areas and less secure in some other areas. And this is according to a research that was done in Afghanistan from the time the transition started all the way until just a month ago, that the research was continuously studying the lives of these women. And the most amazing thing that actually happened was that in the whole period of this transition, in some areas of Afghanistan that we were not thinking that it might get, the security of women might be more in danger, it did become more in danger, and that is in the north of Afghanistan, which it was not like that. We thought usually in the south and the east it would be, but it is actually at some points is better there than it is in the northern part of the country. The men in general, however, on these areas, they are more relaxed now that the international security have left, because they can let their women go out and freely walk about, and they feel more comfortable that way. So they are not as fearful for their security as when they were when the international forces were there. Now that all the international forces have left Afghanistan and only the United States has some forces remaining in the country as advisors and trainers, the Taliban, however, they are not defeated. They're also remaining to be a part of the troops or people that are creating problems all over Afghanistan for the people of Afghanistan. And especially women, and some under the Taliban influence, are subject to the Mahkame Sahrawi, which means the justice system of the desert justice system. There are tribal courts that people get together, and then they pass, whatever they decide, whether to stone a woman because, he's run away with a man, or force them to marriage, or give him as bad, or whatever. Despite all the remaining problems, there has been great progress with all of that, in the empowerment of women in Afghanistan over the past 13 years. The following areas are some of the legal and policy achievements that are noted by the international community and Afghan women themselves. These areas are the codification of women's rights in the Constitution of Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. 1. The Afghanistan's government's National Action Plan for women of Afghanistan from 2008 to 2018, which is called the NAPWA. The Afghanistan's government National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security, which is the UNSCR 1325, which will be launched in the middle of 2015 this year. The Law on Elimination of Violence Against Women, EVA, which was put into effect since 2009, and it is also, although it is a decree by the previous president of Afghanistan, President Karzai, but it has been still in effect, and although it was challenged in the parliament in the end of 2013, but it's been floored, so we haven't really touched the law ever since. So the parliament did not, did not deny it. It's still there and still alive. And then the commitment of Afghanistan's new unity government to prioritize women's rights and empowerment. This is a promise that both the gentlemen in Afghanistan, the head of the Afghanistan government, has given to the Afghan women, and we are hoping to be the witnesses for the changes that is going to be hopefully happening, and we are holding them responsible for that. In the area of gender equality and equity, much has improved in Afghanistan since 2003 and 4, which the gender equality was being introduced for the first time to Afghan women and men. The women of Afghanistan still have a long way to go towards gender equality. But the above-mentioned legal documents and policies have laid the groundwork. Now the responsibility rests not only on the government, but also on the shoulders of the Afghan civil society, including women's organizations, such as the Afghan Women Network, to monitor and make sure that the gender equality is implemented, especially in the Afghanistan's new National Action Plan, or Afghanistan NAP, that is going to be launched this year. Yet another area of great concern for the women of Afghanistan is the impact of entrenched hierarchies and that inhibits the involvement of wider public and decision-making process. That should be democratic. To be involved in democracy, women must carve their own place. Women have to prove themselves twice as much capable, twice as much committed to Afghanistan, and knowledgeable, of course, in order to have a voice and be able to participate in the public life of Afghanistan. Overall, despite one of the most unthinkable political marriages in Afghanistan, that of Dr. Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, who were such a die-hard political opponents and now have created a unity government, the position of these political leaders in regard to the gender equality, peace process, and women's roles seems promising. They are working together towards the same goal. Yet, the women and the majority of people of Afghanistan in general are optimistic about the commitment of the Afghanistan unity government and to the national interest and the well-being of the people, that they are going to a right direction. At the end of this presentation, I would like to introduce to you an overall view of the recommendation of the women of Afghanistan, which has been given by meetings and gatherings of women from all over Afghanistan that was organized by the Afghan Women Network throughout all of these years, and they've come up and given their opinions on what they want in 8 areas. They are the good governance, peace and security, access to justice, political participation, economic development, healthcare, education, and the international community and donor support to the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. In these 8 areas, the women of Afghanistan have given their, point by point, they have pointed out what is exactly what they need. I'm just going to go through them. On the good governance, what they have asked is appoint women to decision-making positions with the government, ministries, and the independent institutions. Consult women in government and civil society in planning, implementation and monitoring of national and international frameworks to guarantee participation, transparency, and accountability on the part of the Afghan government. Prioritize women's participation in leading the fight against administrative corruption. More competent women should be given authority and responsibility in the Independent Joint Anti-Corruption Monitoring and Evaluation Committee and the High Office of Anti-Corruption. Develop strategies and serious follow-ups to end all forms of structural and social discriminations against women. In the area of peace and security, they have asked to enforce and implement the Afghanistan National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. Recruit, retain, and strategically integrate women in the Afghan national security, including at the decision-making and leadership level. Allow 20% of seats at the National Security Council to women in order to factor gender consideration into national security plan. Create an oversight committee, including policewomen and civil society representatives, to monitor the appointment and daily work of the Afghan local police. Review the performance of the High Peace Council, HPC. This should focus on assessing the level of participation of women in Afghan peace process. The analysis should identify gaps and advise change to the High Peace Council structure to ensure that experienced and qualified women are appointed. On the case of access to justice, which is very important for the women of Afghanistan, empower the formal justice system to continue with administrative corruption that interferes with women's access to justice. Support specific strategies and plan to monitor implementation of elimination of violence against women, the EVA law. Support mechanism to ratify and implement family law to address elimination of domestic and social violence against women. Support measures to ratify and enforce regulations to prevent discrimination against women and all forms of sexual harassment against girls and women, especially at the university and school levels. Implement a specific regulation and policies to guarantee prevention and protection of women and girls from sexual harassment and sexual gender-based violence within government institutions, educational, higher education, and social platforms. Increase the number of judges at the provincial level and establish special courts for the elimination of violence against women. At the national level, establish women's shelters to support victims of all forms of violence in all of the provinces of Afghanistan. In the political participation area, provide political and diplomatic support for women-led advocacy organization to reform the electoral law in order to increase the quota for women on provincial councils from 20% to 25%. Increase women representation to a minimum of 30%. This is what we are asking. 30% within senior leadership positions in the administrative and judicial branches of the government. Support participation of women at the national, regional, and international decision-making levels through diplomatic pressures and financial support as and when is needed. And this is where the international community comes in, when they kind of turn around and they say, well, what is it that we can do, how we can help? And then we turn around and we say, well, you can actually insert some kind of a pressure when it comes to the help and say, if the help really does not show that the women are participating and the women are getting a part of the benefits of it, then don't do it. Just cut the money. Support further information of women's networks to share learning in local and regional cooperation to include women in politics and government. On the economic development, Increase the participation of women in the Economic High Council of Ministers to advocate for women's economic empowerment. And that is extremely important because a woman that is economically empowered in Afghanistan demands respect from her family. And that is extremely, extremely important. It changes her position in the whole society. Also, facilitate networks and create links between Afghan businesswomen and the government of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan, private sector, and the civil society. Provide easy lines of credit to businesswomen. Create simplified conditions for women access to loans, especially to those women who do not own land and property. Develop and increase women's entrepreneurial education and training opportunities, including technical and vocational trainings. Implement economic procedures considering gender requirements based on urban economic development as well as rural and regional economic development. Support initiatives that provide easier access for women in the labor market. Health. On the healthcare, develop and increase the number of healthcare centers for women at the provincial level. Allocate a specific budget for reproductive health, healthcare, and prevention of maternal mortality. And develop healthcare insurance for women, especially cancer patients. There is an amazing amount or amazing number of an augmentation in numbers as far as cancer patients are concerned in Afghanistan in the past 10, 12 years. I mean, I know now more, maybe the fact that they are getting more diagnosed could be one of the reasons. Maybe the fact that Afghanistan really went through so many problems, 10, 12 years ago with the bombardments and everything. All of that has such an effect on women's cancer, especially esophagus and breast cancer, is like rampant. Not only amongst women, but amongst men and women. The level has gone extremely high. And also what we want is to evaluate and improve the quality of healthcare services for women, including psychological care, because the psychological problems of the women of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan in general is also a huge problem, and there's not much work done in that. On the education, include women in decision-making and managing educational and scientific opportunities. Increase women access to vocational and educational trainings. Support the creation of educational opportunities for people with disabilities. Promote literacy, higher education, and technical skills building for women. And develop and improve the capacity of technical instructors across the country. And increase the number of women professional teachers. On the international donors, which is the last one, and their support to the government, encourage and support the allocation of gender-based budgeting to empower women through government ministries. This could be one of the, this could be, they can use it as a way of giving their help to the government of Afghanistan, saying so much of it has to be put towards the gender budgeting part. Ensure programming, constitution, and funding for women activists and organizations to develop effective long-term and sustainable programs for the women across the country. Because that has been also one of our problems, that the programs that are provided for the women of Afghanistan, they are mostly very much donor-driven, or they have been donor-driven. And in that case, what happens that the real needs of the Afghan people or Afghan women is not addressed. So what happens is that, what we are really asking the international community to make sure that it's done by the women organizations, and they are in a much longer period of time. And if they are run by the women in Afghan organization, they cost a lot less. They really do. Support the inclusion of women in implementing and monitoring women-focused programs to ensure the transparency of Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework, or TMAF, implementation. Implementation of Tokyo Mutual Accountability Framework is a fantastic framework that actually, during the Tokyo conference, has been put into place to actually ask the donors as well as the government of Afghanistan to adhere to the transparency of spending the money on the different projects and programs of Afghanistan. So that is very important. It keeps both sides accountable. And make funding available for Afghan government conditional on attention to gender and inclusion of women, with particular focus on women in the justice sector. It's very important that we do get women in our justice sector, more women involved. So this was the 8 areas, and I went through them. I thank you very much for being with me and listening. I am absolutely ready for any kind of a question, any concerns in any area that you would like to have. Please ask away, and I'll be more than happy to answer anything you want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Seraj. I suggest that we proceed with Ali Ahmad, have a short panel discussion, and then go to the audience. Mr. Ahmad, freedom of press, freedom of opinion, those are crucial things for a working civil society and the working state as well. And I must frankly say, I was quite surprised about the numbers I read in your draft. There seem to be success stories that have not been told here in Europe about Afghanistan. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum. Good evening, guten Abend, Shama Bakhair. I'm very pleased to be sitting in front of all of you, and I feel privileged to be sitting next to Ms. Mahbouba Seraj. Obviously, when we talk about the development and the reconstruction of Afghanistan and the achievements and failures of Afghanistan, one area which is very prominent is the development of free speech and the media sector in Afghanistan. Just last month, Reporters Without Borders ranked Afghanistan 122 out of 180 countries in its 2015 World Press Freedom Index. This is a positive upward from its ranking in last year, which was 128. And this ranking is a good news for Afghanistan. Of course, it's not enough. We have a long way to go. However, last year it was 128 from 179 countries. Obviously, all this achievement has been achieved after the United States-led coalition forces ousted the Taliban from power. And despite of many challenges and difficulties, this has been one of the clear beneficiary of the war in Afghanistan. A war on terror, which I usually call it a war of terror, but since it's termed as a war on terror, so I stick to that. The development of media sector has been one of the most significant success stories for Afghanistan and its international partners in a post-Taliban situation. In the immediate aftermath of 9/11, the US government, along with the rest of the international community involved in Afghanistan, poured $100 million in the media sector to win the hearts and minds of the Afghan people and rally on ground, as well as to gain international support for the war on terror. There was another reason at work. Media could be an effective means of promoting democracy in a country that had been affected by years of violent conflict. And media could be an agent of change. This space has developed from nearly non-existence to finding expression in hundreds of media outlets in just over a decade. Under the Taliban regime, Radio Shariat was the only radio channel that broadcasted only specific and targeted programs. There was not even a single television channel. Today, there are 65 televisions, 174 radio stations, and nearly 1,000 publications in operations. Obviously, when we talk about numbers and figures in Afghanistan, we need to be a bit cautious because of the survey and the numbers we get it. But this is the more conservative number that I have included in my study. This increase has also spun off diversity in viewpoints. Besides all this, the rapid rise of social media, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube are the most commonly accessed modes of communication and have, in short period of time, fostered not only more active communication between families and friends, but also public debate at local, regional, and national level on a range of civic and governance issues, including corruption and democratic principles. The social media has become a platform where its users express mass support for the Afghan security forces, even as NATO combat troops ended their mission at the end of 2014. Social media has also broken down social taboos. This puts the media in a very powerful position that can affect social change, despite the fragile political environment in Afghanistan. As you know, freedom of speech is a fundamental human right, and media is one of the foremost upholders of this right, since it encourages and enables public discussions and open dialogue. Even the Afghan constitution has guaranteed the freedom of expression, noting freedom of expression is inviolable. By law, the media has the freedom to print and broadcast without any prior censorship. However, in practice, social censorship is practiced when it comes to anything deemed to be anti-Islamic, offensive to other religions, or issues such as military information that may endanger national security. The US and NATO forces officially ended their combat mission in Afghanistan and handed over domestic security back to the Afghan forces. Their role now termed as resolute support, which began 1st January this year. And that is limited to training, advising, and assisting the Afghan security forces. Meanwhile, domestically, the country is plagued with an ongoing insurgency that's led by the Taliban. And that is challenged by many, that has challenged many aspects of Afghan life, including the media outlets. This withdrawal of the international forces will have a direct as well as indirect impact on media, since I usually call the support of the international media, the international donors to Afghan media as the reshapers of the Afghan media in terms of funding and training. This industry will face a drastic reduction in funding due to foreign troops exit. As the pullout of US and other members of international community began, the financial support to media also pottered off, posing serious financial threats to the sustainability of the media sector. A weak domestic economy and the lack of private business sector means low marketing opportunities for the media, particularly the print media, and as such, financial sustainability will continue to remain suspect. And the medium and to long-term challenges include those to freedom of speech in Afghanistan presented by religious heads, warlords, and the Taliban. There is no difference in viewpoints of the Taliban and government-paid religious leaders when it comes to media. They both share similar concerns, which are centered on immoral and un-Islamic programs. I'm quoting one of the spokesmen of a religious community in Western Afghanistan, who was, which was reported on one of the radios, international radio, and he made an analogy of media with the suicide bombings. He said some of the broadcasting of the current media in Afghanistan are far more dangerous than suicide bombings. If suicide bombing kills humans, some of the media take away our people's faith and beliefs. While the Taliban spokesman who talked to me via an email to the study that I conducted has also said that the current media would incite ethnic conflicts, and as what he termed it, that the media is carrying on a cold war for the invading forces in the brackets. However, the exact distinction between Islamic and un-Islamic programs remains arbitrary. Afghanistan remains a dangerous place to work for journalists. Afghan journalists face enormous pressure and are routinely threatened by all parties in conflict: the insurgents, warlords, sometimes the governments, as well as non-state security actors. The biggest concern to the Afghan media would be the government and non-state security actors, because they will try to exert pressure on media personnel to broadcast their agenda. Afghan journalists also on many occasions self-censor due to personal security threats, and this trend will probably become exacerbated. Additionally, as I mentioned, that Afghanistan, due to the ongoing insurgency, remains a dangerous place for journalists to work in. Afghan Journalist Safety Committee, they conducted a study. They routinely, yearly do some studies on the safety of journalists, and their report in 2013, they reported 35 incidents of violence and threats against journalists just in the second half of 2013, which I included in my study, of which the government officials were responsible for 63% of this violence and threats, and the armed groups, including the Taliban, for the remaining. Afghanistan is on the path to consolidating democratic values and institutions, and will continue to do so in the years to come. Free, independent, and vibrant media is vital for the democratization in Afghanistan, but the sector remains vulnerable to the agendas of different actors, including the government officials, non-security actors, religious networks, and the insurgents. The Afghan government and its international partners need to continue supporting the diversity of media if they want Afghanistan to emerge truly victorious from the chaos of the past. I personally believe that the success story of the media sector in Afghanistan, it has not only been the support, the financial and technical support of the international community, but also the need and demand of the Afghan people also contributed to this success. I'm quoting one of the media experts who is heading a media watch in Afghanistan, media watchdog in Afghanistan. He nicely said, quote, "Afghanistan has different color today. With its media, we see a colorful Afghanistan. Afghanistan will write and think freely after 2014 and the withdrawal of the foreign forces. No matter what happens, no force can stop us from thinking, from our free thoughts and expressions." I'll be happy to take questions. Thank you very much. That was the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ali Ahmad. First to Mr. Seraj, to the things you told about the women's situation in Afghanistan. This brought to my mind a little story from Uruzgan province in the south of Afghanistan. This is a province north of Kandahar. I spent there some days with Dutch troops in 2009, and there was a female Dutch officer who had the idea to open a women's center in the little town of Mirwais. And she advocated it, and they had the idea to open it at the cemetery, which seems to be a little bit bizarre, but I was told that this was the only place where women could go without male company. I don't know if it's true. Please correct me if it's not true. So, fact is, The women of Mirwais were in favor of the project. The men of Mirwais were in favor of the project. But in the end, after 2 years, I learned that the project had been dropped because there was so much objection still. So what I'm wondering, there is a strong demand, a vital demand for gender equality, for women's participation, but at the end it doesn't work. How come?
This is a very interesting situation that you're telling. A lot of programs like this all over Afghanistan, they started, with extremely people really willing to do it, and this going to the Qabristan or to the graveyard area. Well, women do go there without their husbands because they go to pray, for their death or whatever. But one of the reasons why it did not take, it did have the support, but it didn't happen, is because the idea was not born by the people themselves. It was still something that was introduced to them from outside. So there is a total, a kind of a rejection and a resentment. Although they know that the program is good, they might know that it's very interesting and it will work and all of that. But because the idea was not introduced as an idea that was born by the people, it did not get the support. And also, the way one gets the support for these kinds of programs, it's very different in Afghanistan. You have to start from the area where there are the elders of that group, the mullahs and the religious leaders. You go and talk to them, you convince them, you talk to the elders, the men mostly. After you get their okay and their support, then you can do whatever you want in that area. But if God forbid, if you do not approach them first, even if you come back later and talk to them, you won't get anywhere. Because they say, at first you ignored me, so that's it. You cannot be doing that. But this is one of the reasons why that happened. And it's not only that happened in Uruzgan, it happened in a lot of places in Afghanistan with a lot of goodwill by a lot of the international, foreign, especially the troops that were there. But it never somehow gelled the idea. The reason was because the people thought it was not born of their own, and that's why.
So it's not that the society wouldn't be prepared already for it, it's because the ideas are not coming from within the society.
Exactly. The ideas have to come from within the society in order for the society to accept it. And also, when you really look at it, and that from that point of view, it's got to be that way. Otherwise, it's going to be considered as a foreign idea. And foreign ideas, some of them might be good ideas, nobody's saying, but at the same time, people, they resent it in general. It's like, what is this foreign idea you're bringing to me? But if it is born of the people, by the people themselves, and they come up with it, then it's very, successful. And the way we are doing it in Afghanistan, we are changing it a little bit. What we are doing is, although the introduction or the birth of the idea might take place in me, and then I have to sell it to the people. And once I go and sell it, the way I do it is like I almost at the end of the whole conversation, I will give them the feeling that they are the ones that came up with the idea. Then I'm successful. Otherwise, I won't be.
Okay. Mr. Ahmad, do we have to think rather in generations than in years if we talk about change in the Afghan society?
Well, absolutely. Actually, what I believe, there is a generational change in Afghanistan already. The majority of the Afghan population are under the age of 25, or some study shows that it's under the age of 30, actually. So it's the majority of the Afghan population are quite young. It's a major force. It's a major power for the change. Obviously, it's not, the conflict in Afghanistan, the insecurity in Afghanistan, it's not something that has been generated or originated from Afghanistan itself. It has many aspects and internal and, of course, external. The generational change is already there. We just need some more time. Actually, the last 14 years has been a great opportunity for Afghanistan, for the international community also supporting Afghanistan. However, as the question was raised earlier, and I do agree with Ms. Seraj that the idea of supporting and the rehabilitation of a country affected by conflict, it has to be originated from the people themselves. If you bring ideas from outside and tell people that this is good for you because it was good for me, it doesn't work. And the ideas and for the rehabilitation and reconstruction of the society has to come from the people themselves.
As I see that there are a lot of very young people from Afghanistan in their 20s or so here in the room. So this is not a lost generation.
Absolutely
this is a generation that will probably see real change in the society.
This is the generation that is going to make it actually happen in Afghanistan. They really will. At this point, seeing, some of their wonderful faces in here and then the faces of their brothers and sisters in Afghanistan, it is such a pleasure really to work with them, to be around them. And as I always say, it's like, okay, fine, this is the part, there are changes in the world that's happening, but then there is another force that is actually moving the society, and that's the young force, and they are going ahead. So I don't care how many of whoever behind them are hitting their head on the wall and on top of with their hands and saying, "Oh, we don't want this, we don't want this." There is a force that's happening. It's like it's going to take everybody there, and that's the one that the young people have it. There is no X generation as far as that's concerned, lost generation as far as that's concerned. Not in the world and not in Afghanistan. I mean, I am all for the young, but then maybe that's me.
From a Western perspective, we are always looking on Afghanistan through the lens of terror, violence, drugs, and so on. I mean, the perspective I had while being embedded with different NATO troops was very focused on dangers in the country. Do we have a wrong perception of Afghanistan and of the people?
Definitely. Definitely. You have such a wrong perception, it's not even funny.
Give us the right.
Afghanistan is the country where I was born and I was raised and I did my education and I walked the beautiful streets of it and I talked to the most amazing people of it and I ate the most delicious bread of it and the tea and the warmth of the people and the love of the family and their love of God and their religion in the way that was so beautiful. There was nothing scary or ugly or anything about it. It came from their heart and it went to the God, to Allah that they were praising. It was a very beautiful country. It was very calm. You could get in a car or in a bus and travel all over Afghanistan with no problem. You would get off in the little Mehman khanas, the little guest houses, and you would just sleep on the floor there with everybody else, and it wouldn't be any problem. You would just go around and talk to the people in the villages. Everywhere, they are hospitable. They are loving. They love their family. They care for each other. As far as the problem is concerned, as far as the fact that we have different ethnicities in that country and all of that, hey, that's the beauty of our country. If you really want to look at it, as I always look at it as I call it the Liaf Qurmai, and I'm sure some of the Afghans know exactly what I'm talking about. Liaf Qurmai is a quilt. of different patches and different colors. So Afghanistan is that, we have all of those beautiful different cultures, the ethnicities. I mean, when you take a look at the Afghanistan's faces, honestly, that always amazes me. You can see from the blonde, blue-eyed, I don't know from where they've come from, and they're all there, all the way to the, to the dark black hair and whatever. All of the faces, you almost feel like the world is there, all of the people of the world are actually living in this country. And it's, it's the culture of it, the diversity of the culture, the beauty of the country. And I'm so sorry you had to look at it, behind the concrete walls that I hate so much, behind the, through those army cars and the whole thing. It's not your fault. It's not the fault of anybody. That's the way the world has become. I'm so sorry. But at the same time, I am one of the ones that are blessed because I have seen Afghanistan. I've seen my beautiful Afghanistan, how it was. And it's that love that I have. And if I can, and I always try to share it with the young generation of Afghanistan. I just want to tell them, the history that you have, who you are, what you were, where you are, where you were. Just, keep on going. You'll be fine. You really will be fine. So yeah, it was a beautiful country. My country, and I want him to add on to it.
Because you are living within this Western perspective now since a couple of years. What is your perception?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that, the perception that you're talking about, this perception has been created and promoted by journalists who have been embedded with foreign forces. I think, I'm sorry to say, including you, because because I have worked as a journalist, and I have been to 29 provinces out of 34 provinces in Afghanistan, and I, not only me, sometimes with my foreign colleagues, Europeans and Americans, and we have reported, a different side of Afghanistan. We have been in close contact with people and with their hospitality, with their amazing hospitality, and receiving whoever you are, as long as you come from outside your village, outside your town, they receive you, with your heart. So the perception is definitely it's not the correct perception, I believe. Because it's a country with around 30 million population, and 30 million people live there. They have a life, and they are just people. They're humans as humans the rest of the world. They want a good life. They want to have families. They want to have education, healthcare, everything. And I think that that's a failure in many media outlets, institutes that they focus. And I know that because I worked with TV, which the foreign correspondent was only embedded with the German troops. They go right and left, and they show only the horror picture of the country. And I think that's a negative perception, which obviously people have, but that's not true.
Still, I think it wouldn't have been a good idea to just walk out of the gate of one of those places and say, "Hi guys, here I am, let's talk."
You would be amazed if you were not embedded, and if you had just gone out, you would have seen an entirely different Afghanistan.
Absolutely,
probably
accepting
Absolutely.
you. Yeah.
My my assessment was that the NATO intervention was a disaster. It probably created the violence it wanted to fight in a lot of aspects. Still, if you think back to the year 2001, do you think there would have been an alternative to a military intervention in Afghanistan? And how's the outcome now? What's the balance sheet?
I'm going to leave that for him to answer.
Okay. Military intervention, it's always a disaster. I look at it, it's always a disaster. I'm not supporting any war anywhere. But as I mentioned in my speech, that one of the beneficiaries of this war has been the development of media. That's true. But what I want to emphasize here, in me personally, I wouldn't go back to 14 years back that if NATO didn't intervene, what would happen? I would say what we could do now to change the situation there. I, as an Afghan, and I, as a member of the world community, as a world citizen, what can I do to change the lives of the people for betterment? I think that's for me personally, that's more important, because Afghanistan is still facing a lot of challenges. Security is an issue, economy, all sorts of other phenomena which is linked to the the lack of development in that country. That's all tied up to today, and I think about today and I think about tomorrow. So there might have been things that the world came to Afghanistan with good intention. Still, there are a lot of challenges, as I said, but I'm hopeful for the future, and I think I and we all can get together and move things in Afghanistan for betterment.
Mrs. Seraj, would you like to add something to this question?
Yeah, I would say, really thinking back, it's a very difficult question, really, to answer this one, because in reality, so much was involved, and so much did get involved in that time. There was a lot of wrong assumption by the world. First of all, the whole recognition of the enemy. Till the end, the world that was fighting this whole insurgent war or whatever did not really recognize the enemy. Who was the enemy? The enemy was not inside the borders of Afghanistan. It was right outside the borders of Afghanistan. It was where Pakistan was. So Pakistan played such a role in this whole thing that they really, really muddied the water very, very badly. I mean, that has a huge effect on all of this, because it took the whole, as you call it, the train towards somewhere else. It just derailed it completely. And so because of that, and then the way the world was, it was actually, well, we are going to go and take care of the Al-Qaeda or whatever that was. It was a different kind of a... And now when we look at the world from that war to the way we are today, how many mistakes have the world really committed? How many wrong assumptions have been really taken by the world? And that's why it's not taking us anywhere near being better. I'm not talking about Afghanistan, I'm talking about the whole thing. Anywhere near being better, but we are in a lot worse places and have much, much bigger problems. So that means that something really didn't go right somehow. I would think that the world really, and hopefully the young generation will do that. They really should sit down and take a hold of what is really happening. Do a complete study of where everybody went wrong, how was it done wrong, what they should do, how they should go about it. They really should. If they want to keep anything of this earth or anything of this world for them, they have to do that. Otherwise, I'm really terribly sorry, but there is not going to be a world that they can call it mine, or even a country that they can say, well, this is mine, because so many of the people's freedoms are going to be played and are going to be lost in the whole thing, that it will make it very difficult. So I'm hoping that there is going to be lessons learned. And what makes me very sad is the fact that I haven't seen that. I haven't seen really the world taking stock of itself and saying, okay, where did I go wrong in Afghanistan? What did I do over there that was not? What was I supposed to be doing? How was I supposed to be approaching? None of this. And the mistakes are being repeated, and they're being repeated in the same way or much bigger way. And then every single time we turn around and we expect to have a different outcome. Of course, we're not going to. We're going to have the same outcome and a lot worse of it.
I mean, right now the combat troops of NATO have left. This is a decisive point, as you outlined. What would be a good approach for the whole world to proceed with Afghanistan? What would be the right way?
Right now, Afghanistan is a country at war. We still are at war. It's just that the shape of it, the thing of it might change. We might have different enemies, or I don't know. It depends on, what is the economy of the world, or Pakistan is going to be, financing the Taliban or not. I don't know. But what I think is now that we are there, then they should give their support as far as equipping them properly, as far as giving them the proper, weapons, the proper ammunition, so they can fight this war. Because otherwise what's going to happen, these people, those soldiers of Afghanistan, the police and the soldiers, they are determined to go and fight this war, and they're going to lose their lives. And they're going to die by the hundreds and by the thousands. And that's going to be because, they don't have proper, they're not well equipped. So I think at this point, they really have to equip them very well, and then let the Afghans decide what they want to do. That's my opinion.
Mr. Ahmad, as you are engaged with de-radicalization, now there has been war in Afghanistan since more than 30 years. Is there a way to get the war out of the heads of the people? Is it still in there?
Yeah, obviously the war is still there. As I said, it takes time, it takes years, probably a few more generations, to have a peaceful Afghanistan, unless the world really eradicate the roots of the problem. If you don't look at the roots of the problems, rather you just look at the surface and try to heal the surface, and don't look at the roots of the problem, then you're not going to solve this problem. As Ms. Seraj mentioned, that the causes of the conflict and the insurgency in Afghanistan is not in Afghanistan; it is somewhere else, and those roots have to be dealt with. Without dealing those roots, I don't think we could have a peaceful Afghanistan like everyone else, every other country has. But obviously, the world is not a place where you can ignore a problem in one part of the world. If a problem rises in a country, sooner or later it will affect other parts of the world as well. So it is not only Afghan problem, but it's the world's problem. So they need to tackle the root causes of the problem.
Last question on the audience, on the panel, then I'd like to go into the audience. If you imagine Afghanistan in 5 or 10 years, what do you see?
Afghanistan in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. You see, I really am very hopeful. I actually believe that this, unity government, is going to really do it, what they promised, or at least a part of it. So I am hopeful, but I am watching them. I am very, very watchful of them. I'm hopeful, and I think we have a very, very difficult times to go through, because we really, at this point, our economy is completely kaput. It's finished. We are in such a bad shape. It's like, forget it. We are really in bad shape. So we have to get that economy back, into kind of action, because without it, we are not going to be able to do anything. And as far as the rest of it is concerned, we are going to be fine, I'm sure. We are going to get along, hopefully. We are going to have our disagreements. We are going to have our, some problems and things like that. But to me, that is very natural. These things happen. So hopefully, with all of the concerns that I told you in here, still I'm hopeful, and that is the reason for people like me who are continuously fighting this, or being the advocates or raising the voice of the women. I have to be hopeful, because if I'm not that, then I don't think I can get out of bed sometimes. It's really hard. I mean, some mornings are extremely hard. When I go through a problem or a situation that it's a fight that hasn't gotten us anywhere, or the level of violence against women gets to be so ugly and so horrible. I just don't want to, I can't get out of bed. I honestly cannot. But then at the same time, I have to put this hope in me, and I hope all of the young people that are here, they do the same thing. We do have a long way ahead of us. But then it's not only us, believe it or not, it's the humanity. We all have a long way ahead of us. The world in which we are living, it's a very different world. And just, I'm hoping that things are going to be okay, as long as they give us, the women, what we are asking for, and we are going to be fine, because the women are a power, and I know that nobody believes in that, but it is the truth. We really are. Thank you.
5 or 10 years, Mr. Rahman?
I think for me, 5 years would be too short actually to think about. But 10 years, I'm pretty hopeful for in 10 years' time, and I believe in the power of the young generation. And this generation is more in interaction with the rest of the world, and they know how the world functions, because we are part of the world community. In 10 years' time, I'm hopeful that things will start shaping and reshaping in the right direction. Although it's moving one way or the other, but in 10 years' time, I'm pretty hopeful things will be in a far much better position than what it is on what will be in 5 years' time.
Thank you very much. Ich gehe jetzt ins Publikum.
Now let's go to the audience. We said actually that the questions might be asked in German. Yes, German or English, whatever you prefer. Yes, please. Microphone. Thank you very much. My name is Thurda Safi. I'm from Afghanistan, and I have a question to Ms. Seraj. You are one of the roses in the political arena. When we talk about warlords, they are most of the time politically active and lead the people into a direction. And I'd like to mention Ms. Malay Jula, who said in 2001, who was excluded from parliament. She was just silenced by the warlords, and the same warlords that are still in power. So my question, how can you actually fight for the rights of the women and advancement for the women's cause? You mentioned Pakistan as one of the roots of the problem and playing badly with Afghanistan. But very honestly, 79, Soviet invasion until 89, and 89 the warlords raided Kabul. So what do you see the rights of the women during that period and now? Can you compare it? Thank you. Thank you very much for the information that you gave me. I am a sociologist. I am half Bulgarian, half Austrian. And we had the fall of the Iron Curtain. And before that period, we were friends with Afghanistan, and we thought that now, with the help of the Soviet Union, everything will be better in Afghanistan. History proved us wrong. But it is very interesting to hear, to see and to hear from you how from today's world and today's eyes do you see and analyze the period of Soviet reign and Soviet invasion in Afghanistan. Because many things seemed to be good for the rights of the women and advanced rights of the women, because there were a lot of female Afghan students in our country, at least during that period. And nowadays, are there political parties that we can compare kind of with European or Western parties like the Democrats or Republicans or Socialists? And are there religious minorities in Afghanistan, or what do Christians have as a position within Afghanistan? Another gentleman, the gentleman over there. And then these 1, 2, 3 persons in the up front here. Hello. You said that the golden age was in the 60s, 70s. I had a very good friend in Vienna here, and he confirmed that, so to say. My question is, what happened? What stopped the golden age? And a different question. The Americans invaded Afghanistan. They always wanted to be there. I don't know what they're looking for in Afghanistan, but what do common Afghan people think about the American invasion? Are they against the way the Americans invaded their country, or what? How do they see it? Thank you.
Please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Really a kind of a variety, a wide variety of the questions. First of all, Sophie said, regarding your question. In Afghanistan, okay. First of all, I just want to give you a picture. Afghanistan of 10 years ago or 11 years ago is not the same Afghanistan of today. It really is not. During this whole period of 10, 12 years, Afghanistan changed a lot. The day when they stood in front of Malala Yousafzai in the parliament of Afghanistan and threw the bottles of water, now they do the same thing in the parliament, but they hit each other on the head with their shoes or their bottled water or whatever, and they have the same fight like other parliaments. The whole world's parliaments, they fight. You know, this is not something that Afghanistan parliament is doing. A lot of other parliaments do that. So they just kind of get into this fist fight, and they do fight. But it has changed. It's not that the whole group is going to stand against one woman and they, attack Malala Yousafzai. So that is not going to happen. If Malala Yousafzai today was in Afghanistan and could raise the same question, there's going to be, you can believe it, that there's going to be a big group of women standing behind her to support her. And in the parliament, she's going to get the support, and outside the parliament, she's going to get support. So Afghanistan has really changed a lot from this time. We've learned a lot more. Regarding the Pakistan situation, the Soviet situation, Afghanistan went through a period of changes since 1978, when we can start there, when the invasion of the Russians, not officially but unofficially, started. So we all went through really a lot of problems in the country. And I'm going to come back to the question of this lady that was talking about the women in that era, which is, she has a point there. But as far as the rest of the country is concerned, we really went through the warlords, and then later on the Taliban, and then first the Russians, and then the fight, you know, and then the way the world kind of treated us, and then Pakistan, and then the whole birth of the Taliban, and then the whole birth of the madrasas, and then the money situation, and it was a huge mess. It really was. And Afghanistan really got caught smack in the middle of it. And the fact that the world really forgot about us. After the Russians, they left, the world turned its back and said, you know, we really are no longer interested. Very, very big mistake. Because if they had stood there, and if they had helped the Afghan people right after the withdrawal of the Russian troops, none of these things would have happened. The history would have been written in a different way. But unfortunately, it was not done like that way. So this is the way it happened. Because then Afghanistan got involved or became a part of a lot of other games. So right now, today, the warlords are still the warlords. They are there, they play their role. But one thing I want to tell you, they don't have the same force. They don't have the same, punch like before. They still do, damages here and there. They still are doing that. But they are not the same people anymore. The people of Afghanistan, I think, have become a lot more wiser and a lot more knowledgeable about what they are, how they are, and why they are. So we are standing in front of them, and we know them. Now we really know them, every single one of them, who they are, from where they operate, and how they operate. We know all of that. But they are still creating problems, and you're right. So this is going to take still some time, and hopefully by the end of this unity government, most of those warlords are going to be absorbed or something into the system. That's what we are hoping, and hopefully it will happen. On the question of the Iron Curtain and what you said, and the Russians when they were in Afghanistan, you're absolutely right. In those first few years that the Russians or the Communist Party of Afghanistan was in power, and the Russians were there, and the women of Afghanistan, as far as their rights were concerned, they had all the rights. They really did. They were working in the government, they were going to school, they were free, and all of that. But then again, another huge problem was happening, because right there and then, the way they were positioned against Islam, and the way they were positioned by the system. So that was not going to work. It was just not going to happen. They came and they painted the whole country red. This was not right. Or they stopped the mosques, or they things that they did that had nothing to do with the regime itself. The regime could have been a communist regime and would have maybe most probably worked very well in Afghanistan. And most probably Afghanistan really needed that, or a socialist regime for that matter. But this against the Islam part, that was wrong. That should have not happened. What they did, they started a war of the ideologies, and then boom, they stood in front of the Afghans. That was wrong. If they had gone through the system and brought the ideology, hey, it would have worked. It would have been fine for the Afghan people, I'm sure. But they touched the religion. And the Afghan people, you don't touch their religion. You don't touch their belief. I mean, this is something that for whatever they have, their belief system, they are very, very honest about it. So that's, in my opinion, again, it was the wrong thing that they touched. That if they had left them, we would have had a very, very nice country, most probably right now would have changed into a socialistic country, and we would have been perfectly fine. On the question of the Golden Age, which comes to the gentleman, the Golden Age, it was the Golden Age, and it really was. I was a part of it. And what happened that Golden Age really stopped, a lot happened. All of this happened. The Russian invasion took place. The government was challenged. The system was broken. They suddenly thought that they don't need a monarchy in Afghanistan anymore. Maybe they didn't, but maybe it was a little bit early. Maybe they needed. I don't know. But the whole change that happened. And then the years of war, the years of this whole mujahideen that they stood in front of the government, it was because of the war of the ideology in Afghanistan. And then the invasion of the Americans. Americans is very funny. In Afghanistan, Americans are loved and hated at the same time. But that's the way the Americans are in most of the world. People love them and hate them at the same time. And that is because of the way they acted towards the Afghan people. If they had been a little bit kinder, a little bit calmer, this resentment would have not happened. I do remember one day in the beginning, it was 2004, the beginning of it. And the Americans were everywhere on the streets of Kabul. There were not all of these these concrete walls or anything. But then the American cars, the convoy, was coming out of the embassy on the streets of Kabul, and they were going somewhere. The nastiness that once American soldier was stopping the people on the street, with the way they were acting, I cannot tell you what it did. And I stood there, I froze on the street. Not only me, every single person all around me, they all froze. It was like, oh my God, my country has been invaded. It was a second like that it went to our heads because of the way that this army person was like doing this, doing this, doing this, doing this, and telling people with that face, with that voice, don't be on the street, get out of the street. Nasty. That I could see it in everybody's faces, that they hated it, they hated it. It was like, what do you mean I can't be walking on the streets of my own country? Who are you? And then that created a resentment that slowly and slowly and slowly grew amongst the people. And this is because of a wrong. And then after that, they did this whole winning of the hearts and souls and minds and whatever they called it. Nothing worked because it was too late. The damage was done. They should have not done that from that time. They should have been very careful on how they should go in a country when they were. But then they had invaded us, so what can I say?
Jetzt war deine Frage, der Herr, dann hier in der Mitte und da drüben, glaube ich, noch.
So another 3 questions.
Salam, Mahbouba Seraj. Ich möchte Sie auch willkommen heißen in Wien.
Please allow me to welcome you here in Vienna, both of you.
Es geht darum, Sie haben gesagt, Sie setzen sehr große
You said that you are hopeful for Afghanistan because of the youth and the young generation.
volle Hoffnung. Ich bin ein bisschen anderer Meinung.
I'm not of that opinion
Medien verfolge,
because I'm following the media,
mitbekommen von
and what you see, what you hear of Afghanistan,
bin ich ein bisschen pessimistisch.
I am more pessimist.
Ich bin ja selber ein Moslem.
I am Muslim.
Ich glaube an den Koran.
I believe in the Holy Quran, and in the Quran, chapter 11, verse 13, it says that Allah is not going to change the situation of people if they don't change the situation in the point of view they have in their heart. So I hear and listen from the media that the madrasas are financed from abroad and that they are still financed from abroad quite a lot. And that's where the hearts of the young generations are touched. And Sunnis and Shiites, and it's not official, but they don't like each other. And they like to hate each other, And actually, the exact feelings that we shouldn't show or have, especially in the view of the young generation. In Austria, there's a new law saying that if mosques are financed from abroad, they have to be closed. They can only be financed from inside, from national sources. Do you think it would be possible to have something like that in Afghanistan? Only mosques financed by Afghanistan Afghan money so as to allow the moderate Muslims to show how the real Islam is moderate and to be loved, and not anything as a product of Islamic State or anything else. So I think that as long as mosques are financed from sources abroad and influenced from abroad, I'm pessimist. How can you be optimist in that situation? Thank you. Good evening. Ms. Seraj, a question to you. I'm living for 13 years here in Austria. I'm Afghan woman. You said it's so beautiful because so many different people, from blonde to black, dark, everything. It's a very nice idea, a very nice picture, but I honestly am unable to share your enthusiasm, because the reality as I see it is that Pashtuns, Tajiks, and the biggest groups kill each other, and that the big tribes continue to fight each other. So I love the idea that all the people of the world actually are united and can be found in Afghanistan. But don't you think that the best solution would be to divide Afghanistan in three different countries: Pashtun country, Tajik country, etc.? So the big three. Tried. Why do I have that opinion? I'm a lawyer, and I work a lot with asylum seekers from Afghanistan coming to Austria. And when you listen to their stories, they came, if they are Tajiks, because they have been persecuted by the Pashtuns or by someone else. And it's always the minority within the majority that gets actually basically exterminated. And I don't think that this is going to stop. And we just have to say, stop it, let's divide the tribes, let's divide the people. Okay, third question. My name is Maya.
And we also have a lot of connection to Afghanistan. And I happen to be Ali's friend. He studied peace and conflict studies. My question is, Ali is seeing in next 10 years that young Afghans will make a change. But I see Afghan guys in Vienna. I see their hairstyles, their fashion, their clothes, their shoes. They look like Europeans to me. So my question to you, how do you think in 10 years they will leave European dreams, or guys who are in America, why would they leave America or Europe in this life? Why would they go to Afghanistan, do something for Afghanistan?
For me, as an Afghan, I rather prefer to work first for Afghanistan, because that's where I belong to, because Afghanistan is a place where I was born and I grew up, and I have spent the best times of my life. And at the same time, when I look at problems, conflicts, as a peace researcher, and as someone that have studied and spent some of my time in education abroad, I feel that there might be a need for me, not only in Afghanistan but probably anywhere else. If I speak for myself, I will go back to Afghanistan. I go back to Afghanistan, but obviously I know Afghans who have spent years in Austria. If I talk only about Austria, they are willing. The situation in Afghanistan, as have been said earlier, that they may not fit to their condition, to their financial, economical, and security situation. But if the situation improves, I'm pretty sure that at least a good portion of Afghan youth who are living abroad, who are either studying or working, they would like to go back and do something for a country that they belong to. And I think loving a country where you were born and you grew up, that's in your blood, and no one can take that. Wherever you are, you will have that love. And I'm sure, and the discussions I've had with some of the Afghan youth in Vienna, they have shown willingness to return if situations get better. And just one other thing, actually, about the question about the division of Afghanistan, whether Afghanistan should be divided or not be divided. Obviously, one reality that I want to mention here, the Afghan community in Austria, particularly in Vienna, is more divided than the communities in Afghanistan. Afghan community in Vienna, like one ethnic is not ready to face the other ethnic. They're not meeting each other. While in Afghanistan, they have intermarriages. They are living together. They're living in the same neighborhood. They visit each other on New Year time, on Eid occasions, and other happy and sad days. Unfortunately, it has really a bad news for me as an Afghan when I see the Afghan community in Austria, particularly in Austria, where I have spent more than 2 years here. They are divided. They're totally divided. They cannot get together. I mean, as ma'am, you proposed the division of Afghanistan, or division of tribes and ethnicities. With all the respect I have for you, I don't believe that your thought will take any foot in Afghanistan, because Afghans have the natural conflict that exists everywhere, that the conflict, that disagreement between two persons, between two ethnicities, between two brothers, that exists. That's a natural. The conflict or tensions and disagreement. That's very healthy, if it is managed well. If it is managed well, if you don't accept it for any peaceful situation, you have to accept the other. You have to respect it. If you don't respect your brother, your other ethnic group, then of course things will go in the wrong direction. Thank you.
I'm going to your question, which was regarding the mosques and the fact that you're a pessimist when it comes to all of that. Well, this all depends on the way you look at things, truly, because in reality, you're right. The whole of the madrasa situation, or the mosques, the way they are, people are getting the money from outside and they are building it. That is going on. It's true, it's going on. Pakistan is pouring a whole lot of money, or one of the Arab countries are doing the same thing, and it's pretty chaotic. But then at the same time, with time, this is going to change. You see, the world is changing right now. Right now, for example, right after what happened in Pakistan, when they went to that school and they killed 138 students in Peshawar. That was a huge mistake done by the insurgents or by the Taliban. Because sometimes actions like that changes the whole course of history. And it has changed. It really did change. Because what happened? That the world said, no more. We are not going to give you a single penny anymore to Pakistan, they said that, for you to go and start financing a group of people that they will do something like that to your own people. That means that there is something extremely wrong here. In Pakistan, finally, they realized that. Why do you think the Taliban right now, they are they are going all over the place, and there is this whole talk that is going to be the Daesh or the ISIS coming and joining them, and they are going to be changing their faces. All is because of economy. There is no more money. Nobody is going to be supporting these people. So that's a change that happened in the make of the whole thing, in the political scenario of the world. And the world's political scenario keeps on changing. So it's never going to stay like this forever. There is not going to be a whole lot of money to be building, mosques in Afghanistan, and Pakistanis are going to be giving that money. No, believe me, it's not going to happen that. Because they're going to be needing their money in their own country, and they have to do things there. Now we come to the fact of you brought another point, which is the Shia and the Sunnis in Afghanistan. The Shias and the Sunnis in Afghanistan, their differences may be a problem for outside, you guys that are outside, but it's not a problem as big as you think in Afghanistan. There is a difference. There are Shias and there are Sunnis, but they are all living together. Everybody is fine. And what we really are very aware and we don't want to allow is the fact that somebody from outside can play this as a card against us. Remember Iraq happened? Just remember these Islamic countries. You don't have to go any much further. You don't have to go back in the history. Just do a study of what is going on in the world. Just do a study with Syria, just do a study with Egypt, just do a study with Iraq, just do a little study, just study these countries. It will tell you, when you allow a little bit of a difference in your area to be used against you, they will use it against you to the max. And they will make you miserable. So that is why we have to be aware of it. As people, we should not allow that. In the Afghanistan that I talk to, with the woman that I talk to and the people I talk to, this is the one area I always beg, please don't allow it. Because if you allow it, we are going to get somewhere that there is not going to be a return. Because what are we going to do? Kill our own brothers? Again? Just because, he happens to be believing in a different sect of Islam. Is that what I'm going to do? Just chop off his head off? Is that it? No. That is not supposed to be allowed. You don't allow that. And you have to work on it. And you have to work on it consciously. Accepting the problems, seeing it, but working on it. As for the partition of Afghanistan, I have to mention something. I will die if Afghanistan goes through a situation like that. I will literally die. Not only me, I can promise you, there are so many people in that country that will die, they will really die. Because that's not what we fought for. That is not what we have. That tiny little country with all of its different ethnicities is the only land that the people of that country know. And we want to keep it that way. By dividing it in 3-4 pieces, what do you think is going to be left of us? We are going to become the servants of the bigger countries that are around us. That's what's going to happen to us. A part of us in the east and the south is going to be the servants of Pakistan, the other one of us of Iran, the rest of us of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, and then we are going to be so little that we are going to become their servants. Is that what we want of Afghanistan? Really? As the Afghans? Is that what you want? That's why you left that country? I had to leave Afghanistan also, but then I went back. It's been 13 years, 14 years now, or 13. I'm working in Afghanistan. But, you cannot be doing that. That's not what it is. And as what Ali John said, I'm really sorry if this is what is going on amongst the whole group in Vienna. Please, come on, guys, You're living in the most beautiful country in the world. What's wrong with you? Just get along and live and have a marvelous time. Let your children learn. Let your children study. Let them, they have the most amazing education system in this country. You are living in the most beautiful country in the world. Come on, take this opportunity. Make something of yourselves and just, become somebody that everybody is proud of. We live in America like that. There is no problem. Our neighbors, they are all, half of them are Hazaras, Pashtuns, and Uzbeks and Tajiks. We don't care. So what? What am I supposed to do? Kill myself? That because there's a Hazara sitting next to me? What? Come on.
I help